I don't think Donald Trump wants another election. You think for a second I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
And you think he's going to run again?
No, don't give me. Who spends $200 million on a ballroom at their home and then leaves the house? So this is serious, guys. This is serious.
So it'll be Newsom Trump in 28.
No. This guy doesn't believe in free, fair elections. He tried to wreck this country. Were you there, January 6th? I think Fox was. At least they were in a lawsuit. They seem to have lost any memory of that. Shareholders didn't. I mean, he tried to light democracy on fire. He dialed for 11, almost 12,000 votes. Now he's doing it in plain sight. And people say, oh, it's just Trump being Trump. People actually think this guy's serious about having another election? You think he's joking about 2028? You think when he brings foreign leaders to the Oval Office and he goes to the White House store, have you seen this? Anyone? Is it just me? And he shows them the 2028 hats? He's not being serious? Wake up. You will lose your country.
Stand up. That's right, Gavin Newsom getting us started right there. Hello, my friends. Welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, and thank you very much for being here, for pressing play, for joining me. I've got an excellent guest that will be here coming up. It's Dr. Rob Davidson from Paging America. Well, that's the name of his new podcast, and he is a real smart, passionate ER physician still practicing out there, I think in West Michigan. We had an awesome conversation yesterday. You can watch it on YouTube. We were live, youtube.com/standupwithpete, or you can listen to the news segment, which is coming up right here in a moment, and or skip ahead to it. My conversation with Rob starts at 18 minutes. I want to thank everybody who joined me at last night's Thursday night stand-up happy hour hangout. We were there almost 3 hours. There were, I think, 50 or so people there, and we had a great conversation. I highly recommend you go listen to it the first hour. So many really smart, great perspectives, including what I call thunder and lightning. That's Kevin Richberg and Bill Boyle were really very interesting in their perspectives on several issues, from the occupation of D.C. by the military to the horrific shooting in Minneapolis that we all know about. It was a really interesting and important conversation. Also heard from Kathy Nathan out there in Minnesota, who's a Board of Education member. Her perspective was super important, and I might just share that hour here for the wider podcast audience because that's how good it was. And we are just a week away from Farm Jam at the aforementioned Kevin Richberg's farm, Slate Hill Edible Forest. If you can't make it, go buy some honey from Kevin right now. Show your support for the community, and you're all welcome to come. It's free. You can make a donation. That'd be helpful to just cover the expenses of food, etc. But we're going to have a great weekend next Friday and Saturday night. Very much looking forward to that. But now I'm looking forward to sharing with you the headlines and clip show that I made, and then my conversation with Dr. Rob Davidson. After all, I do host a podcast, so let's do it. I feel like the biggest story in America continues to be the aftermath and questions surrounding this horrific shooting at the Minneapolis Catholic School. I guess, we name these shootings when they take place at schools, I guess. Sandy Hook or Newtown. We talk about the shooting in Parkland or Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. That's the name of the school. This one is Minneapolis Catholic School or Minneapolis school teaching or shooting, or the School of the Annunciation. Apparently it had been there for 100 years and was like a linchpin. It is in Minneapolis. And so we're going to continue to hear about that. I watched the video. I'm not sure I needed to watch the video of the father of his 8-year-old son, Fletcher. I don't recommend it. I'm not sure why I needed to watch his pain. Fletcher Merkel was 8. Harper Moisky was 10. Annunciation Catholic Church is the name of the school. Anyway, I don't have a lot more to say about it. We talked about it at the Hangout. I'm sure you're following details and reading, like I am, about the shooter and his manifesto. I'm not going to take up time here on the podcast to talk about it because there are a lot of other stories. And if you're interested in this horrible nightmare, and I don't blame you for being interested in it, there's all kinds of coverage. They're going to be digging through the shooter, whose name I won't say, and every detail about everything he'd said and written, and mother who worked at the school, he went to the school, and that's all I have to say about it right now. I'm going to get out to some of these other really important headlines, obviously, from yesterday, including what has happened at the CDC. The scientists and leadership of the CDC apparently were disloyal or disagreed even with RFK Jr. and Trump. Well, they've got a new guy there. His name is Jim O'Neill, and there are a lot of questions about the new guy. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of concern around what is going on at this very prestigious, very important institution, and I will do my best to cover it. I talked about it today with Dr. Rob Davidson. I'm going to talk with Dr. Aaron Carroll about it, hopefully, and others. And I'm sure a lot of you are out there, are researchers, scientists, physicians that know things. So definitely not want to know what your concerns are about what's happened at CDC. I've got some clips coming up for you as well on that from the scientists. But chaos inside the CDC, massive staff walkout yesterday. They're none too happy over there, the scientists who rely on scientific evidence and not loyalty. Russia has attacked the main city of Ukraine, Kyiv, which was supposed to be off limits if there was any respect or fear of the American leader, but there isn't. An hours-long barrage of Russian missiles and drones killed at least 18 people in Ukraine's capital, including 4 children, early yesterday. The assault, less than 2 weeks after Trump's summit in Alaska with President Putin of Russia, showed how recent American diplomatic flurry has done little to change the Kremlin's determination to continue the fighting in Ukraine. That's how it was written in the New York Times reporting, but a pretty awful situation there and a real escalation, I think it's fair to say. Lisa Cook, whose name we didn't know until this week. She is one of the members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, a linchpin member, and she has now filed suit against Trump's attempt to remove her from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. In her federal court complaint, her lawyers called Trump's move unprecedented and illegal, arguing that his unsubstantiated allegation of mortgage fraud doesn't meet the legal requirement of showing cause to remove her. So it's a really very important story as well, and we should be paying close attention, I think, to that. Also yesterday, Schittler fired a board member of the railroad regulator that is weighing the proposed mega merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, 2 major rail lines in the United States of America. His name is Robert Primus. He was a Democrat, but he was nominated by Trump to the Surface Transportation Board. In 2020, he began serving 21. He's the only member of the board to oppose the merger, and a tie-up was approved by the regulator in 23. At the time, this guy said the deal was not in the public interest. Well, now he's been fired because he tried to stand in the way of the merger. So that is another major development, a major headline worth mentioning. Also this one, a federal judge in Washington has blocked the Trump administration from firing the director of Voice of America, Michael Abramowitz, which is a pretty important development. This is weeks after Kerry Lake, who somehow has a job, tried to remove him from the post. So he's still there, holding on like several others. What about that trade deal with Japan? How's that going? Well, not well. It's not going well. I thought it was a done deal. Their top trade negotiator canceled a trip to the United States yesterday over issues related to the trade deal. In a statement, Japan's chief cabinet secretary said that his trip would have involved the discussions of U.S. tariff measures. So they're not coming. So that's a pretty important development. I think it's fair to say. This one, too, the U.S. Navy surging 8 warships to the Caribbean and Pacific waters near several Central and South American countries. A significant buildup for a region that has rarely seen such a large presence of U.S. military vessels, and a move that has escalated tensions with nearby Venezuela. The ships are part of a, quote, enhanced counter-narcotics operation to carry out drug interdiction missions in Latin America, according to a defense official who talked to the Washington Post. In Memphis, a judge ordered a new federal trial for 3 former police officers found guilty of charges related to the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols in 2023. So I think that's a good and important development I was happy to see. The Trump regime planning an immigration crackdown in Chicago that would involve hundreds of Homeland Security officers and the use of a naval base. I've got some sound from the mayor there, Brandon Johnson, coming up. Now let's go to Denver, where the education department threatened to pull funding from their public schools unless they barred transgender students from using bathrooms that aligned with their identity. So they're going to pull funding if they don't. Wow. Unbelievable. Torture. Just terrible. Awful. Also yesterday, Schittler himself ordered government agencies, including NASA and the National Weather Service, to end collective bargaining agreements with unions representing their employees, trying to destroy public sector unions as well, because everything must burn. And lastly, he signed a Make Federal Architecture Beautiful Again order, which requires Washington buildings to maintain the Greco-Roman architecture, the marble columns and all this nonsense. I mean, that's what he's busy doing. Unbelievable. I guess it's better than all the rest of the fires that he's starting. CVS is currently not offering COVID vaccines in 16 states, including Florida and New York, because it needs the CDC panel to recommend the shots. I have a lot of questions about that. We were discussing that last night. It's very disconcerting and important and interesting. We need to talk about it. And finally, fishermen pulled in an orange shark off the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. Still no word on why the shark is orange, but I'm guessing it's gone full MAGA. I'm guessing it got the memo and it wants to swim in the waters of America someday. I don't know. It's actually some kind of pigment condition, apparently. All right, so those are the headlines. It's now time to get to the audio, the clips I've got for you. Time for the clip show. Let's start with the mayor of Chicago. His name is Brandon Johnson. He had to answer a stupid question, maybe not completely stupid question, but I thought his answer was out of this world, real good. And I don't know how you feel about Brandon Johnson. I know he's been a controversial mayor to some extent to the people of Chicago. And, but I think what I've seen, the way that he is rhetorically reacting in these interviews, I like it. Here he is.
This pushback against Trump, knowing how he responds to that, could actually provoke him to follow through with this talk about sending in the National Guard when yesterday he seemed to waffle. Could this make things worse, all this pushback?
Could you imagine if, as a descendant of slaves, if my ancestors would have had that same rationale? Let's not fight against the Confederacy. Let's just try to get along, and then maybe one day they'll give us our freedom. Nowhere in the history of America or the world where marginalized people have sat silent and idle, and they've been able to actually achieve justice and liberation. The fact that you have a unified front in Chicago where we are rejecting the occupation by the military of our cities, that's actually fighting for our democracy. That's what's required in this moment. Leading in this moment takes a great deal of courage, but we stand on the shoulders of so many people that have come before us. We have seen these type of tyrannical acts before. One thing that we know for sure, when we fight back against tyranny, the people united always prevail.
All right, Brandon Johnson, great answer. I like it. They're staying strong there in Chicago. Okay, let's go to CNN, Abby Phillips' show, which I was supposed to be on tonight, and then they bumped me, and I don't know why. I'm a little annoyed by that because there was no reason given. So we'll see who they end up having on tonight at 10 p.m., and then we'll know. But Jennifer Welch was on last night, and I think she's real good. She's one of the co-hosts of the I've Had It podcast. She's talking in this clip about the mental degradation of the guy in charge. And what do you think?
It's definitely happening. You see complete moral collapse of the United States government. The cabinet meeting with 3.5 hours of superficial praise is so cringeworthy. He's attacking the Fed. He's attacking all of our institutions. He's eliminating FEMA. It is horrifying that he is putting troops against American citizens because he claims that he's the law and order president. But we all know that's a lie because he's a convicted felon. He pardons convicted felons. He surrounds himself with obsequious people that kiss his ass all day, every day. It's nauseating and painful to see how weak he is to Vladimir Putin and others.
Yeah, good stuff. There is this one I found as well. I think this is from the same show. More of Jennifer Welch.
He wants to cook the books. He wants to control everything. This isn't a limited government guy. This is not a law and order guy. This is a guy who has redecorated the Oval a la Marie Antoinette style and is building himself a ballroom because he has zero intention of leaving. And the more Americans realize this, the more prepared we can be. He wants to control the Fed. And what happens when autocrats do this? Inflation spikes.
All that and more. What also happens when autocrats get rid of scientists leading scientific agencies? Here's a little mashup of the members of the CDC who stepped down.
I was the director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases.
I'm Dan Jernigan. I was until recently the director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases at CDC.
I'm Dr. Howery. I was the chief medical officer who turned in a resignation yesterday.
I tendered my resignation because I could not be a part of the weaponization of public health and CDC.
We really think that the use of the scientific information as evidence to help the decision-making with vaccines is critical. And if that is not the approach that is being taken, then Americans are not getting what they need from us.
I'm a scientist. I think it's okay to question, but you shouldn't know what your recommendation is going to be before you have the data. We should always be questioning, but you shouldn't have a preconceived idea before you have the data.
Yeah, that was a little supercut of all three of those leaders from CDC. And now here is a longer clip from Dr. Howery, who was on MSNBC. And she should be everywhere, and I hope to get these scientists on at some point myself.
Doctor, you, as we understand it, were escorted out of the CDC headquarters today. What happened and what was the final straw here?
Yeah, so, over the past few months, things at CDC have been really difficult when it comes to having science and data-driven decisions. And we knew there was an upcoming vaccine meeting in a few weeks, and we're very concerned that there's some debate before we have the data and the science. And so myself and a few other senior officials have been really talking about what can we do to protect the agency. We were also concerned when Dr. Menarez was called to the Secretary's office after trying to make some updates and scientific improvements to this vaccine work. She was not allowed to do those. And so we had determined that if we don't have a scientific leader at the agency, we could not remain.
And Doctor, I want to address the fact that you heard that at the top of the show, the Health Secretary, RFK Jr., was talking about how this has to do with the culture inside of the CDC. How do you react to that?
So
what culture is he referring to?
Yeah, so a lot of times they'll say that CDC is very insular and not transparent. I would argue that CDC scientists are rigorous, extremely collaborative, and have been transparent. We put our data on the website. We have dashboards, extensive reviews that we open for public comment. And I came from outside about 10 years ago from academia. I can tell you that the CDC scientists are top-notch and excellent. What we would actually have preferred was to have more interactions with the secretary. My senior leaders never were able to brief the secretary, our scientists, on any of these issues.
All right, there you go. That is it for the clip show. And now it's time to get to my guest, who is a scientist of sorts himself. He's actually an ER physician, and he's joined me a couple of times before. I'm really happy to have him back. I think he's super smart. He's super passionate. He's now the executive director of the Committee to Protect Healthcare, as well as the host of the podcast, and you can find him on Substack at Paging America, which is real good. pagingamerica.substack.com. Definitely go check those guys out. But here he is right now, joined me live, and I love this conversation. I think you will. I learned a lot from it, and I really like Rob and happy to have him back. Let's do it right now with Dr. Rob Davidson.
It's like, it's my natural state right now.
Yeah, well, we're live, so people heard you're asking permission. But I mean, you're an ER doctor. You're supposed to be cool, calm, and collected. But I feel like you are always on the razor's edge, and I feel like that's because you see all of the problems. You can also see the problems coming down the pike. Welcome back, Rob.
Thanks. Good to be here.
When I say that, one of the things coming is COVID. It's not going anywhere. Neither is the flu. Neither are measles. And now the worm has completely eaten our Health and Human Services Secretary's brain. And there's news now because the FDA is now limiting access to COVID-19. What does that mean?
Yeah, it just means it's going to be harder for regular folks to go in to their pharmacy and get a shot, right? And protect themselves, protect their families, protect their communities. They're limiting it to people over 65, people with some risk factor. They're specifically, the CDC recommended now against pregnant women getting it, and American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the leading healthcare voice for OBGYNs, came out and directly contradicted that, because we have all seen pregnant women get extremely sick from COVID, get blood clots because they get COVID and they're pregnant. They have seen it. I've seen it. We've all seen it. It's freaking crazy. And I think it's just really sad that they're letting politics take over, like real data, real science, and real lived experience of docs and patients. We know what happened, and this winter could be rough.
Well, I'm healthy. I don't need to worry about vaccines. So why should I care?
Yeah, I mean, we're all healthy until we're not, right? And so, I have seen plenty of previously very healthy young folks get really, really sick from COVID, but then have lasting effects of being so sick from COVID, long COVID, or, even if it isn't like years, I mean, months of being short of breath and fatigued and not being able to do normal things. There's a thing called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia. It just means people's heart rates go crazy fast when they stand up. We're seeing a huge surge of that in people who have had COVID. And it's, for some people, becoming debilitating. They can't do normal functional daily life kind of activities. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just, all of us who are youngish, I'm youngish and healthy, still interact with people in our lives that are older, people who are immunocompromised, pregnant women, people who would benefit from us maybe not getting them sick. And so, just as a service to our fellow human, seems like a good idea maybe not to be spreading this thing around.
Yeah. I mean, I only care about the people I know. But
well, just hang out with them and you still want to protect them, right?
Well, they sometimes hang out with people they don't know, which is I've tried to make them stop, but they keep doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I say these things as a way to demonstrate the fact that there is that attitude out there. And I think just, what do we do about, cultural self-interest in this case, in this country, when it comes to illness? I point to COVID as a real illustration of who we are, and that we Americans haven't made a shared sacrifice in our lifetimes. There has been no shared sacrifice, but that's what society sometimes needs and calls for. I think it's fair to say. I'll shut up and go back to the expert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my grandparents made a shared sacrifice in World War II. My great uncles went and served over there and had lifelong health problems related to, shrapnel and PTSD. And, people rationed right during World War II. I mean, so there was a shared sacrifice fighting fascism. Now people are kind of lining up to support it and also kind of lining up to kill their fellow humans, apparently, and lining up behind the brainworm. It's really sad.
You mentioned the board organization of OBGYN doctors and the vulnerability of pregnant women with COVID, but you could pretty much you could mention any group of doctors, the American Pediatrics Association or whatever it's called. They keep having to put out statements to the federal government to say, listen, this is what we do all day. And what you're saying is wrong and people will die. Do I have that about right? That like all the doctors and they're not all on the take. Are you on the take, Rob?
No take. Never got a penny from pharma. I think I got a lunch from pharma a couple of times in residency. I got some pad thai during a tox conference. like full disclosure, I did. Pfizer rep handed out pad thai every Thursday or once a month. So that's about it. That was a long time ago. Hopefully that pad thai is worn off by now. But yeah, it's, truly, I don't know. I guess like RFK, Trump, their whole crowd, maybe they don't understand people that actually try to do their job, for their own fulfillment. I mean, I feel fulfilled by being a doc. I like what I do. I like that I get to kind of use my brain in a certain way, use my training. But a lot of what we all signed up for is to help other people, That I think is a foreign concept to certainly Trump, RFK Jr., folks in his cabinet, folks, in his wider circle. And unfortunately, as evidenced by, a lot of the very selfish rhetoric you hear about, COVID, well, fuck it, I don't care if I don't get sick. Who cares about other people? A growing number of the people who support him kind of had that same attitude.
There's a lot. It seems like the headlines coming out of HHS and all, we're all learning the agencies that HHS oversees as well, because they're spinning off and out of control or being run by cartoon villains. And, staying with the vaccine thing and the pediatricians, there's every year they come out with a schedule, which gives guidance to pediatricians on to when and what vaccinations. And it is really well researched and referenced and not very controversial, I don't think. But they also changed that. I mean, just sticking to the issue of, they're also, what was the headline about mRNA and pulling support and funding for this miracle breakthrough in research that not only treats COVID, but some very serious, nasty other diseases and so on. So just talk a little bit more about the vaccines that have either been changed, withdrawn, or had their research ended or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when they change the schedule, when they do it without evidence, right? Like we have changed the schedule. We've changed a lot of parts of healthcare. We used to give aspirin to all people over a certain age with risk factors or heart disease. You don't do that anymore. You do it on someone who's had a heart attack or has heart disease, because we know taking an aspirin does have a negative effect on some people who just don't need it. So we're all willing to change and happy to change when we get more evidence. A lot of what I learned 20, 30 years ago is different now than it was then. We have to keep up with that as doctors, and certainly those agencies keep up with that data. They meet on a regular basis and they comb the data. They look at all the the effects of these drugs, both negative and positive, and they come up with the schedules. But when those schedules are changed for political purposes, that's part of why the CDC director wrote a letter about that. I think 4 people at the CDC, the director was fired, but 4 other higher up people, the CMO, like the head of vaccine and respiratory illnesses, a couple other folks resigned. And some of the things they cited were the changing of the schedule without evidence, right? Politically motivated changes. mRNA is really particularly gross because this president, he should have run for that and potentially won re-election in 2020 based on Operation Warp Speed. Like literally a sane person in a sane society would have had every hat, every sign saying Operation Warp Speed, vote for Trump. And I think that would have been enough. Like that effort. And did Trump do that? No, he didn't. But he was the president, right? He gets to claim credit. When they lose jobs and they're president, you give them give them the blame. When they pick up jobs, you give them the credit. They did Operation Warp Speed. He was the president. He gets to tout that and pound his chest. He didn't do that. Like that's insane. And now the platform, the mRNA platform that's been around for over a decade before COVID, that allowed us to have that rapid response, they're pulling research on that and limiting that. I mean, that whole platform, they had treatments and trials treating brain cancer. I mean, I had a good friend who died at 43 of a horrible brain tumor, glioblastoma. We've all probably heard stories of that, young people in the prime of their lives dying of these horrible diseases. And here's a treatment that potentially could save these young, healthy people with brain tumors. And because RFK Jr. has the worm in his brain, we don't get to do that anymore. We don't get to play with that tool. It's cruel. I mean, we got to keep talking about it. The MAGA crowd's not going to hear it, the Maha crowd. And then there's a lot of folks who, it's preaching to the choir, but there's a lot of sort of normies out there just living their lives and they don't know what's right. Right? They're just living and some headlines. A lot of people,
I don't know if you know this, a lot of people do their own research.
Oh, there you go. I have a tombstone we put out at Halloween with a little skeleton in your art. It says, I did my own research 2021. So, I've heard that one too much.
Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, a couple days ago, RFK went on in front of cameras and he said that he sees kids walking through the airport and other places where he goes. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But he said he can tell when a child is dealing with, quote, mitochondrial challenges or, quote, inflammation by just looking at them. How egregious and dangerous is that? You're an ER doctor, and can you look at a child and what does that even mean, mitochondrial challenges of a child? I mean, do you diagnose? I suppose you can. It matters the way he's not a doctor and he's saying these things. Please help.
Yeah. Well, he says people shouldn't take medical advice from me. He said that in a hearing after he was after he was nominated. And we all said, yes, we agree. Stop giving up medical advice, right? A, why is this creep looking at all these kids in the airports? That is a little creepy, right? B, maybe they're not looking at you because you scare them, right? I mean, this old dude's like checking me out, like, sir, they don't want to do that. C, I think I'm on the letter scale. what is he talking about, right? This is insanity to look at people and diagnose some complex metabolic syndrome derangement that they sort of, it's almost like the turbo cancer kind of term that was coined to describe something that doesn't exist, cancer from the COVID vaccine. Some folks brought it up. He heard it and he'll keep repeating it. So the same with this mitochondrial mess that supposedly he can diagnose walking by. I mean, we were trained, and this is the thing, I train residents even, when you go look at a kid who comes in, their parents are worried they're sick, your first thing is sick, not sick, right? Like some kids, they got sniffles, they got crud, they're okay, whatever, they're going to be fine. And some kids, they're just sick, they're sick. And then you got to figure out why and figure out what to do for them. He was not trained in that. He doesn't know that. He's not a doc. He shouldn't know that. And he shouldn't talk about it and try to scare people with, whatever he's calling this science. And he does that. He throws around big words that make it sound like he's somehow in the know and somehow the deep state is hiding things from these parents. And really, I think just making shit up.
He's not even making it up. He hears it from somebody else. I think sometimes, we give him too much credit. He's also raised alarm about childhood diabetes, which is a huge thing actually, and autism, but he's used incorrect statistics. On autism, he says he's going to find the cause. And I know the autism community of families is not monolithic, but I have seen and heard that a lot of families that have kids, especially that have autism, are pissed because it insinuates that they did something wrong, that they caused the autism that their kids are dealing with. And I've heard from these parents. And how dangerous is it to kind of raise the, and also then not raise concerns today or yesterday on TV about the leading cause of death of children, apparently guns. So he thinks they need to look into mental health issues, not the guns. And one side, he's denying the actual problem. This happens about a lot of things in America, just ignoring the real problems and then creating problems where they don't exist.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's again, in light of the horrific shooting in Minneapolis, it's particularly gross that he would completely ignore that and then talk about something. I mean, your statement about families with folks with kids with autism and kind of being pissed. They should be pissed. They should be pissed about that. They should be pissed about him characterizing people with autism as folks who will never love, who can't wipe themselves. Do you remember that little diatribe he went off on? Mischaracterizing folks on the autism spectrum, sort of classifying every person who's severely autistic and extremely, far in the spectrum with folks who are highly functional, capable of love, capable of complex jobs and complex equations, and certainly, capable of wiping themselves. So that's another piece. Yeah. But then the other piece that's I think the most insidious, which he's capitalized on, is so many families with their child with autism are looking at this previously healthy appearing child, seeing them really struggling and suffering, how that impacts the individual, the families all around. And he is giving them false hope that he, A, will find the reason, B, that he many times has touted he has found the reason, right? And it be vaccines in his mind. And so when he can point to that, tell them this is the cause. If you're a desperate parent, desperate family, looking for reasons, looking for answers, and someone tells you it's this, I cannot blame people for jumping on that bandwagon and going along with a supposed person in power and expert, So really him preying on those very vulnerable and susceptible families is particularly gross and insidious. He should be rejected from civil society for all three. But instead he's at the top of the heap in this administration.
What else do you want to say about gun violence in general, and not particularly, 60% of gun violence deaths is suicide, and there's a lot you can do to prevent that. Just make it harder to get a gun when you're feeling at your lowest, For example, there's all kinds of regulations and so on. But what else do you want to say about gun violence and the way that this administration and this HHS or whoever else is handling it, looking at it?
Yeah, one particularly egregious thing I saw, I think Representative Andy Ogles posted, thoughts and prayers. And someone, and I think they subtweeted a picture of he and his family with AR-15s. And, the fact that so many people have access to weapons of war, to guns that can fire so many rounds in such a short period of time. It's bad enough if you have a handgun firing off a few rounds, but the amount of destruction you can do in some of these mass shootings, number of people you can kill or injure so quickly, so easily. the loopholes against background checks that would be easy to close, right, with legislation. The shield laws protecting gun manufacturers from any liability when their weapons of war are used to kill innocent people. There's not enough you can say about it. I mean, we've been talking about this forever, it seems. I remember back in 2018, the March for Life after Parkland. I think a month after Parkland that happened. Maybe it was an anniversary of Parkland, if I'm not remembering the dates. But I feel like we've been kind of beating this drum for so long, and their response is always the same thing. Right? It's not guns, it's the people. Well, we're the only civilized society, only Western industrialized society, maybe the only society anywhere that has this problem, right? And so maybe it is in part the guns, and maybe we need to actually have some legislation to just kind of control who gets it and what kinds they can get and how much damage it could potentially do. And I'm sure a lot of people would be pissed off hearing that, but it's just the reality that we're dealing with. And as docs, and I work in a small rural area, we haven't seen anything like this. Thank God, I'll knock on wood. But these mass shootings, they can happen. They have happened anywhere, right? This isn't confined to big cities and blue cities and all these places. This just sort of randomly can happen anywhere. So people should be concerned. My kids are all out of public school now, but I very much, every time something like this happened, you think about your kid and doing the drills and
I was with my
something
daughter.
Needs to be done.
I was with my daughter yesterday on a college visit, and I was purposely plugged out of the news, but of course we sat down for lunch, and I stupidly looked at my phone, saw about the shooting, and I brought it up to her, and she had a very, it's not like I didn't know this, but it said a really honest and awful conversation about it, where she talked about how scared she was in just being in school, and I was just like, it's so hard just to be in that building for a lot of young people, period. Having to worry about that is so awful. And yet, we haven't done enough at the federal level, at the state level, and a lot of activists, we need to give credit for them. So I always hate when people say nothing changes, because things do change at the state level. And a lot of activists are working hard to elect policy makers who will do something, and they have. Rob, this CDC, you mentioned it. Trump fired the head of his CDC, who he picked. The excuse, my understanding, is that she wasn't loyal; she was disloyal. And it's a crazy thing. The word loyal is a weird. I don't like loyalty to a politician or to. I don't even like. It's earned, and it could be broken. And what do you make of that? Apparently, they announced a new head of the CDC today. You mentioned those other three physicians and scientists that also resigned. There was a walkout today in Atlanta at the CDC. This is such a huge, important deal. People don't understand how great. Most people heard of the CDC only through COVID, and it gave them a black eye because they got some things slightly wrong, but it's we also know it's the gold standard for the rest of the world. So what more can you say about what's happening in that very, very important institution?
Yeah, the thing about public health and the CDC being the kind of tip of the spear of our public health response in this country is public health. When it works, you have no idea it worked. Right? You can't have a bumper sticker that said, "Look at us, we prevented disease." Right, because it didn't happen and it doesn't register, and it shouldn't. And people who work there, who have worked there, gladly do their jobs knowing that, right? They're not going to get any glory. I remember at my med school graduation, the person who spoke looked at a bunch of us out in the audience. I was going into the ER, other people into surgery, other specialties, said, all you people who are going to lay hands on patients, that's great. You will impact people's lives. But boy, the people who make the vaccines, the people who study the diseases, those people will save orders of magnitude more lives in their careers. And it is true. We just don't know it's happening when it's working, and that's a good thing. I fear we will know what's happening when it isn't working. And that's what we're staring down the barrel at, is it not working? When they put people who are loyal to a person or to an ideology rather than people who are loyal to data and science. And all the do my own research people are going to spout off about that as, the science data corrupted, blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. These people are career people who are trying to help people. Sometimes they get it wrong because it's fallible. People are fallible, but they're not nefarious like Trump and RFK and those folks. That's what they're putting in there.
Yeah, you mentioned the vaccine makers. You know, I'm good friends with Peter Hotez, and so I've known what he's dealt with personally in his career. Man has saved millions of lives with the vaccines that he's helped produce in third world, underdeveloped countries, and a frighteningly large portion of America is calling him a murderer. And by the way, you know, this is what fucking pisses me off. Hotez was on Joe Rogan. He was on the show and I was on Joe Rogan. And so like we both know the guy, and Peter told me he texted Joe and said, "What are you doing? You know, have me back on, or have me on with somebody else." And he just ignored it. I mean, guys like that are so responsible for the misinformation and conspiracy theories, and they know better. He knows him. Right. He has his number. He knows better. This guy saves so many lives, and he gets demonized. I'm sure you do as well, just for the things that you're saying, much less the lives that you're saving every day in the ER.
I do, right? I mean, I've had, some fire come my way, certainly not like Dr. Hotez. He's done it on a much bigger scale and taken a lot more arrows. But I think those of us who choose to speak out, speak on the side of kind of truth and reality, and always in the interests of kind of helping our fellow human and the most people we can possible, I think you just have to make that choice, right? I think these folks at the CDC who left made that choice, right? They had to leave because they couldn't, be loyal to this ruthless attack on reality that's going on in the administration and at HHS under RFK. And so, they had to leave a job, I would imagine, a career that they found very fulfilling, I would assume. I think getting to that level in that public health apparatus, I think the significant impact you're having on lives of people, and giving that up has to be painful. So if any of those folks are listening and want to, come and talk, certainly talk with you, talk with us on Paging America, join up with the Committee to Protect Healthcare. We're working on right now a campaign responding to these firings and the FDA decision to have doctors call on their members of Congress to do some investigations. In a normal government, normal functioning government, if 5 very highly placed CDC level director people either quit or were fired in the span of a day, Congress would be investigating what happened. Just asking what happened, how'd that happen, and what are the ramifications. We don't see any evidence of that happening thus far. I think we need to pressure those folks to do that.
I'm looking at your podcast, Page in America, which everybody should go subscribe to and listen, as well as a Substack and support Committee to Protect Healthcare. You have an episode, your most recent episode is "It's Not the Bruise, It's the Cover-Up." Have you weighed in on the bruise on Trump's hand?
We had the reporter from the Daily Beast on who kind of broke that story about the cover-up on the hand. And so, that was I haven't weighed in. Listen, I think there are still a lot of questions, and that was what the kind of the gist of the interview was, that there's so much secrecy and defensiveness going on in the administration about his health that it just makes people question what could be going on. I've said it all along. They said it's because he takes aspirin and shakes hands. So A, who shakes hand with the back of their hand? B, why is he taking aspirin? They told us he doesn't have heart disease, that he's never had a stroke. Those are the people who should be on aspirin, not just a random nearly 80-year-old. So is there a reason, right? Does that connect to the fact that he clearly has swelling in his ankles? They said it's venous insufficiency. Maybe it is, right? Elderly gentlemen who are a bit overweight will definitely have, veins that don't drain well, and they'll get swelling in their legs. Could be as simple as that. But until they're forthcoming, I think their response was a letter from Ronnie Jackson. You know Ronnie Jackson? Ronnie is a former ER doc, congressman, former White House a physician, was dealing in drugs while he was at the White House, drinks a bit much, would seem at times, and just speaking in hyperbole, telling us it's the healthiest president in the history of the United States. I mean, come on. I mean, we can see that isn't true. We don't have to ponder real diagnoses just to know, that is demonstrably not true. So just share the information. Like, the American people have a right to know if there's something going on with this guy or not. Alex Jones apparently really wants to know. He thinks he's on death's doorstep. So I think we all deserve to know.
You're so good at talking about all these things. Everybody should listen to the podcast and listen and follow Dr. Rob Davidson. I really appreciate your passion, and I know it must be so hard knowing what you know and doing what you do to see what's happening. The fact that you haven't turned away and haven't become so cynical, we all have a certain thick skin, that you're giving up matters. Obviously, it matters that you practice and that you're still doing the work that you do. But the way that you talk about it is important, and sadly, it's increasingly courageous. So I appreciate everything that you're doing with the podcast and nonprofit, and I always appreciate when you come talk to me. So anything else, Rob, that I didn't ask you that you wanted to weigh in on?
I don't think so, but like right back at you. You're providing a platform and you're speaking out against what we see going on these issues with healthcare, on other issues with the administration and autocracy and everything they're doing. And I think it's important that there are as many voices as possible because people consume information in so many different places. We need to make sure people are seeing and hearing what's going on and what's wrong with what's going on, right? If we all become silent, that lets them do whatever the hell they want to do, and that's not going to fly. Not at least what you and I are on the watch.
Next episode, Peter Attia, right or wrong? This guy's got a huge. Have you heard of that guy?
No,
that's
maybe.
Crazy to me. It's crazy because my close friend, Dr. Aaron Carroll, who's a researcher and media guy and doctor, he too hadn't heard of him. Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman are massive, Rob. I want you to go on a deep dive and tell me, like, a lot of what they say seems, science-based, and they ride a fine line. I don't know.
Okay.
But they're all about, like, health and longevity and protein and statins. And I don't know.
Next episode. That'll be my intro.
Yeah. I want to see what you think. So.
All right. I'll report back.
All right, man. Thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate you. All right, there goes Dr. Rob Davidson. Go check out the podcast and the Substack. It is pagingamerica.substack.com. Of course, the nonprofit, the Committee to Protect Healthcare, and Dr. Rob's very active on social media. So go follow him. All the links to Dr. Rob Davidson in today's show notes. Like every day, if you don't check out the show notes, then what am I doing over here? It takes a lot of time to do those show notes every day. So please check them out, and please favorite or add or follow the guests, and please say hello to them on whatever social media platforms they're on, and tell them you heard them right here on Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Go write a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you've never done that. Follow on YouTube at youtube.com/standupwithpete, and go follow the right Substack. That's substack.standupwithpete. If you need to find me there as well, please do. A lot of people following there and subscribing there. Thank you very much. Most importantly, get a paid subscription or upgrade your paid subscription, patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Okay, that's it. That's all. Thank you very much to the great John Carroll for writing and performing all of the music. We just found out he's going to be at Arm Jam. Very excited about that news. And I hope that you are considering coming. And if you want more details on that, that is also linked in the show notes. All right, that's it. That's all. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
They knew that change was going to come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, to make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.